Tonight, bipartisan brokering appears to have broken the logjam in Washington, but is it really working? And the politics of snow. New York's Mayor Bill de Blasio off a firestorm of controversy over snow days. Those are today's topic for our agenda panel. And let's bring them in. Erin Carmone is a national reporter for MSNBC.com. Sabrina Siddiqui covers Capitol Hill for the Huffington Post. And Bill Scher of Liberal Oasis is also a senior writer at Campaign for America's Future. And a welcome to all three of you.
Thank you.
So here we go, guys. It was start with Politico, which has this story that's gotten us talking about the topic, asking, is Washington working again? This article is citing a 2-year budget deal, a farm bill, and now over the Tea Party objections, you had House Speaker John Boehner sending the 1-year debt limit increase to the White House, no strings attached. So, Sabrina, I'm going to start with you on this and ask you what your take is, and do you think we can note this as legitimate progress in Washington?
I'm not entirely convinced. When you look at times where Speaker Boehner has relied on Democratic votes, it's typically for must-pass legislation where if Republicans were to push the deadline, then the alternative is they get blamed for economic impact that is both immediate and severe, such as the debt ceiling this year and the fiscal cliff last year. Other moments of bipartisanship, I think, that have been cited are things like Hurricane Sandy, where, again, the alternative was leaving millions of Americans in limbo who were relying on that aid to come through. And, you know, I wouldn't necessarily equate that to progress and any sort of hope for immigration reform, for example, happening this year, which I think is the analogy that people are bringing up. Because when you look at other issues that need to get done, immigration reform probably being the chief among them, there's no real deadline for that. There are longer-term political ramifications, such as if Republicans, of course, want to take back the White House in 2016. But this year, it's an election year, and it's a base turnout election. They're poised to, of course, keep their control of the House and possibly even retake the Senate. So Republican leaders know that immigration reform and not acting on that is not necessarily going to jeopardize their chances.
Okay, I want to talk about the movement that we've seen somewhat on minimum wage with you. We have the federal minimum wage. You see what the president's proposing. He was just there talking about it this morning. That can possibly get done. Democrats overall are saying we're going to double down on minimum wage. But when you look at the extending of unemployment insurance, that seems like we've gone over the cliff on that, and we're not climbing back. So when you look at that, is it safe to say that lawmakers are still governing from crisis to crisis? Because that's a huge crisis for so many in this country.
Absolutely. I think it really depends on what your benchmark is. If you're comparing it to the politics of extortion that we've seen the last couple of years, if we're comparing it to baseline things to keep the government running, being tied to huge decisions about America's future, then we're in a good place. But not for the millions of people who have lost unemployment insurance, and certainly not for the millions of people who are caught kind of in limbo based on our broken immigration policy. Anything that is going to require the spending of political capital, anything that is not going to be keeping the status quo, as Sabrina mentioned, a deadline-oriented approach, unfortunately, I think those people are going to only be political bargaining chips. The best hope is just that Democrats are going to continue kind of trying to back Republicans in the corner, both on minimum wage and on immigration.
But again, on extending the unemployment insurance, I mean, it's been, what, 6-7 weeks since that went down on the 28th of December. And we had Harry Reid and all their Democratic leaders saying, as soon as we get back from our holiday break in January, we're going to put this to the front of the table and get something done for these people.
Right. Well, unfortunately, if the votes are not there, then that's just talk.
So, Bill, let's talk about this morning's Washington Post, in which Greg Sargent looks at all this through the lens of 2014. He's pointing to Mitch McConnell's re-election battle in Kentucky, where his GOP challenger is ripping him as spineless and a Democrat in disguise as a Republican. Can Republicans justify compromise and still hang on to their base?
Well, after the primaries. You know, the primary filing deadlines are generally in the spring, and most of the primaries will be done by June. So if you're going to do something that's going to cut against what the Tea Party wants, you're probably going to do it in June. And that's the sweet spot, perchance, for immigration and also for minimum wage. I know Sabrina and Erin are a little more pessimistic, perhaps, than I am, but I do think we have examples of bipartisan success. They mentioned the Politico article. We can also add to that the repeal of the heart of the Bush tax cuts, the expansion of Violence Against Women Act for gays and lesbians, the ratification of Obama nominees that help them enact labor reform, and bank reform. So this has happened. It happens when the pressure points get applied and they feel like there's no way out. When Boehner passed the debt limit this week, he said to his caucus, I'm getting this monkey off your back. Well, immigration's a pretty big monkey. Yeah. Even if it's not a monkey for the 2014 midterms, it's a monkey long term. Boehner knows that. Party leaders know that. If you can apply that pressure in a way they feel like there's no way out, they do move. So I understand why people are down on Washington, but if you take that pessimism and give up, you might be missing some potential opportunities.
Yeah. I would just ask you guys, we don't have much time, but yesterday we had New York Mayor Bill de Blasio. He kept schools open, and there was a big hoopla all about that. Do you think he dropped the ball or made the right call? Because when you look at the politics of this, schools will lose funding if they're not open a certain number of days. You have low-income workers that are not able to necessarily stay home, take care of their kids. So bottom line, good call or bad call by Mayor de Blasio? What do you think, Erin, first?
I think it's a good call. It's a series of unappealing options. We've had 6 storms in 6 weeks that the mayor has had to deal with. You mentioned parents not being able to find child care. That is an important issue. 44% of kids made it in. The ones that didn't, hopefully there were alternatives for them.
Yeah. Other things that I forgot to mention, school lunch programs. I mean, that really is how a lot of kids make sure they get nutritious meals every day. Sabrina, what do you think about the mayor's call on that?
Well, good call, and you mentioned it right there, school lunches. 1 in 5 Americans with children don't have enough food, and then last year, 23 million Americans, as we know, receive food stamps. So there are many families who rely on schools to provide their children with 1, if not 2 meals a day. And if their children don't go to school, then they simply won't eat. So I think that was perhaps the biggest reason that both de Blasio as well as Carmen Farina, the New York City Schools Chancellor, gave, and I think that makes it a good call.
And Bill, final word to you. What do you think? Make the call.
Well, it would be a better call if de Blasio made the arguments that they just made. But he had changing stories. Yeah. He was blaming the Weather Service. He was saying at the same time that it was more snow than I expected, but then we're hardy New Yorkers and we can deal with snow. So it didn't sound like it came from a clear place. And if he saps his political capital with weird explanations like that, he's going to have a hard time doing other reforms that come from a more populist place.
Okay. Bill Scher, Sabrina Siddiqui, and Erin Carmone, who's staying right here because you're with MSNBC.com, so don't have the mayor call you. Got that? Okay.
I'm not going anywhere.
Thank you very much. And meantime, here's a look at some of the stories topping the news now. President Obama heads west to California today. He's going to assess the damage and bring attention